My name is Robert Franklin. I'm conducting an oral history interview with Marion Keith Barton on May 1st, 2018. The interview is being conducted on the campus of Washington State University Tri-Cities. I'll be talking with Keith about his experiences living in the Tri-Cities and working at the Hanford Site. And for the record, can you state and spell your full legal name for us?
Marion Keith Barton, MarionKeithBarton.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Keith. So, let's start by talking about your life before Hanford. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Pasco,
Okay.
August 21st, 1951, at Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Pasco.
Okay, so you're local from the area.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess let's back up a little further and talk about your parents. When did they first come here and why?
The Hanford area project here brought my dad and mom out this way in 1948. And they were seeking work. They both are from Texas. And I think my dad may have come out first. And then my mom followed along. And so that's how they got started.
Where in Texas were your parents from?
My dad was, I think, born in Kildare. And my mom was born in Gonzales. And my dad worked at a refinery, but I don't think it was in Kildare. It was in another part of Texas. And so he had to go there for work. That's when he got older. And my mom, I think, grew up in Gonzales.
How did your parents hear about Hanford?
Through other relatives that had someone had come out here and started to work, and a relative, I'm sure, because we're related to a lot of people that are here at the time, and then they would phone back or call back or whatever, and tell them, hey, there's work out here and at Hanford, and you should come on out, and you're making $2 an hour or something, but it was a lot more than they were making back in Texas, and so a lot of people just another would come out and go to work.
What family, what people, or what names, what were the names of the folks that your parents were related to? Anybody stand out?
The Daniels family, the Mitchells, and the Miles. My dad was married to the Miles family that was out here. He was married to Gladys Miles at the time, and I think in Texas, and then they divorced, and he married my mom, and so and there were some of the relatives of Miles. They would never tell me anything, and they would call my dad, "Hello, Uncle Cracker," because his name was Crack, and they call him Cracker, all that stuff. But that's what they would call him, and then they would call him Uncle Cracker, and I go, what? I never knew why they would call him that. But then I found out later he was married to their aunt and stuff. So I'm going like, okay, now I'll put two and two together. But it's a lot of stuff that they didn't share with you about the family history, and we didn't have that way of tracking it back then like we do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said your dad's name was
Marion.
Your dad's name was Marion.
Yeah, but he had, I don't know, I think he played baseball, and a lot of people that sometimes, like when they passed away, no one would know if they put Marion in the paper, who is that? Because they all went by their nickname. You wouldn't know some of the people that even I grew up with. The only thing you knew was by their nickname.
And so your dad's nickname was
Cracker.
Cracker.
Yeah, and they called him Crack. But my mom and dad were Mr. and Mrs. Barton to each other. And so that was pretty easy. But you would know it when they said it, but, it was just the way that it was. And they all had nicknames.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people came out of Kildare, that town specifically.
Oh, yeah.
To come to work at Hanford.
Mm-hmm.
And was it just your dad that worked out there, or did your mom work out there as well?
It seemed like my mom worked out there briefly, but I mostly know that my dad worked out there more.
Okay. What else do you know about their lives before they came to work at Hanford?
Well, mom would just, when she was in Texas as a young girl, I think she would just work for other families in the Texas area. She did like cooking and cleaning houses and stuff like that when she was in Texas. And my dad, he was at the refinery, and so somehow they met up. And
what do you know about their education? How far in school did they get?
my mom had maybe a year or so of college,
Okay.
and my dad only had a sixth grade education.
Oh, well. And what do you know about their initial experience of coming to work at Hanford and finding a place to live?
Well, when they came to the Tri-Cities and to Pasco area, I think Kennewick was pretty much off limits, and so, you know, all the family wanted to stick close to each other and be around each other. So I think, I don't think you can live like from where the tracks were in Pasco, like from past like First Street and the underpass. You had to live on the east side of Pasco at the time. You couldn't live on the other side. Once you got past the First Street, you couldn't live over there for a long time. And I think Richland was pretty much off limits to the black folks that came out here. And I know my mom would, I kind of ramble on sometimes, but my mom would say that you couldn't even get arrested in Kennewick. They wouldn't even put you in jail if you were black. You couldn't, it was like first in Washington, I believe, a black guy, he was arrested, and she would tell me the story that they handcuffed him or tied him to a post and called Pasco and say, come get him, come get your N-word.
Right.
Yeah, so that was pretty much the way it was, and that's the way, a few things that I would hear him say, just sitting around as a kid. Because as a kid, when they would talk, back then you couldn't say anything as a kid. You just listen, and if they didn't say something that they didn't want you to hear about their life, you had to go outside and play. So you couldn't hear, but just bits and pieces of what was going on.
Yeah. Where did your parents first move when they came to the Tri-Cities? Do you remember the first house they lived in? Or?
Oh yeah, I mean they were on 610 South Owen Street in Pasco. That's where I grew up.
South what?
South Owen.
Owen.
Owen. O-W-E-N.
O-W-E-N.
Yeah, and I think the house was like condemned. Like when I was in high school, it was condemned and had to be torn down because it had no foundation. He basically had a trailer that's sitting on that property, and he built the house and he knocked out a wall of the trailer and built the house, the kitchen and a bedroom and a living room onto the trailer at the house. And so with no foundation and with the part of the trailer still being there, they had to move. And so then we moved about two blocks up to Elm Street when we were in the early 60s, around maybe 65, 66, maybe somewhere in there. We moved to Elm Street, 525 South Elm.
Oh.
And that was the only two places that we lived.
Great. Growing up, how would you describe life in the community?
Well, it was fun. I mean, just growing up as kids, you just go have fun, and a lot of people around and just play and have fun, and it was pretty nice. I mean,
did you stay mostly in East Pasco?
Yeah, pretty much most of the time. We would go across, like when I got older and played Little League and baseball and stuff, we would go to Memorial Park and have games and stuff there, and then just kind of, we'd walk back from there.
What did you do in your spare time?
Well, in summertime as a young kid, I didn't have jobs or anything, so I would just, play and stuff like that. And I had strict rules not to get in trouble. So the rules were pretty tight at the Barton household.
Do you remember any particular community events?
As a young kid, no. Like as a youngster, my dad would always have like parties at 4th of July, so like that. But other community events when I was real young, I don't remember. But And then they would have sometimes like they would have like my mom was a Democrat, so they would have like different deals, like a dinner or something. And my dad would never go, but my mom would take me along, and we would go to certain events like that. And so,
you already talked about the house that you grew up in. Did you live by yourself, or did you live with any other families? Was it a single family house or a multi-family situation?
no, just our family.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had a sister but she was like 10 years older than I was, and so by the time I got 8, I think she was gone and had moved out.
Did you attend church?
Oh, all the time I had to attend church. Yeah, church was big. You had to go to church. I don't go much now. But
what church did you attend?
We attended New Hope Baptist Church.
New Hope Baptist?
Yeah.
And what role did church play in the community?
A big role. Yeah, I mean, that's where a lot of people got together, and I think that's part of how they dealt with a lot of stuff and stress is that church and the meeting and seeing other people. But Sunday was always church day. My dad didn't go. No, he didn't go, but my mom did.
And your mom and you.
And I had to go.
How many? You mentioned an older sister. How many siblings did you have?
But just my older sister.
Oh, so the family's just you and
my sister.
Older sister.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you recall any family or community activities, events, or traditions that people brought from the places they came from?
Well, the 4th of July was a big one, and baseball, I think, was big. But before I got old enough, my dad was, I think, let's see, how much older was he than I was? He was, getting up in age when I started to I think he had pretty much retired when I was in high school, so he wasn't real active. But when they first moved in here, we were younger, they all played baseball. The Daniels, my dad, and several other guys in the community, they had a league that they played in, but I only know bits and pieces, and because I was so young and I probably didn't understand, but I knew that they would always talk about playing baseball, and that's what they did for recreation and fun.
What about food? Did your parents, did people bring food traditions with them from the South?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They would, like, 4th of July, like, the fish fry. It was a big fish fry on the 4th of July. But they didn't have, but my mom and dad were pretty nice to a lot of people. If people would come up and didn't have much, sometimes they would stay with us, and until they got on their feet and found a job, and then they would move out. But for the church, for fundraisers, they would have on like Saturdays or so, different Saturdays, they would sell like fried chicken dinners and like that. And they wouldn't I think you can get a dinner for I remember something like $3. You get fried chicken, a piece of pound cake, and some other stuff like that. And that's how they would raise money for the church, the building fund, I guess it was. They were trying to help with.
Oh. Were there opportunities available here that were not available where your parents came from?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What kind of opportunities?
Work. Just work. They couldn't they could work, but the amount of money they made back in Texas was like minimal. And I don't think that they had the opportunity. With my dad's education, I don't think he had the opportunity to move up the ladder very much as far as, getting a real high-paying job. My mom, she had more education, so she came out, and later on, she got a job at Ice Harbor Dam as a biological aid, which was a fish counter, and so we did pretty good when she started working like that.
In what ways were opportunities limited because of segregation or racism?
Well, my mom, she was pretty active as far as, for the community. She was like on a lot of committees and stuff, so we didn't have sidewalks, so she tried to push to get sidewalks and stuff like that for the community. And I know she would work real hard with CAC, the Community Action Committee, I believe it was called. And she was big on trying to get City Hall to get provisions, because like on the east side, they wouldn't do hardly anything with the roads, and I don't think we ever did get sidewalks all around, but a few here and there. But it was difficult, so it was a fight all the time to try to get improvements, for the community.
Could you describe any interactions that you or your parents had with people from other parts of the Tri-Cities?
Like mostly church folks and stuff like that I would see. We didn't, just relatives and stuff that mostly. And my dad, he had a few friends come by that like he liked to drink, and so he'd have his drinking buddies come by, and he had a pretty good relationship, I think, sometimes with the people he worked with, and they would come by and see how he was doing and bring him stuff like that. But it was mostly just, they would work hard during the week, and the weekend they would go down to, I think, Jackson's Tavern, and he wasn't a gambler or anything, he just liked to drink, but church was the big thing, how you had mostly interactions. It was just mostly with the church, and that's what they did. That was a big part of everything. That was the church.
Yeah. Where did you go to school?
Well, grade school, I went to Whittier, which was on the east side.
Mm-hmm.
And after Whittier, sixth grade to Whittier, and then I went to Isaac Stevens Junior High School. From there to Pasco High School. From there to CBC. And from CBC to Eastern Washington University.
How did segregation or racism affect your education?
Well, you know what? My mom always pushed for me to stay in school, because I know one time she came home and she said that I was in the 7th grade, and my grades were not good. But the teacher, she would go to the meetings to see how I was doing, and she came back and said that one of the teachers told her that Mrs. Barton, we wouldn't worry about your son. She said, because most of the black kids drop out of school in the 7th grade anyway. My mom was pretty feisty. She said, I think she had a few choice curse words for him. She said, so she told him, I don't know how many other kids drop out of school, but this one is not dropping out of school. And so she made a point to him that I wasn't going to drop out of school, And so that kind of upset her real bad. And I would hear that a lot. And then she would tell that story at different times to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And she was, like I say, pretty active as far as, making sure that I stayed out of trouble. I had to stay out of trouble, for one. And trying to make sure that she was up on what I was doing as far as education and stuff like that. But I just kind of slacked off, and I didn't really try real hard, but I had to go to school and do something.
Yeah. Thanks. That's a great story. Who were some of the people that influenced you as a child?
My mom. My dad, he didn't say a lot to me. I don't think he couldn't tell me about my grades because he didn't know, but my mom, she would, they would sell encyclopedias. She made sure that she bought a set and different things for me to learn and to do things. And then the Mitchells, W.S. Mitchell, he was Vanessa's uncle, I believe, but he went to Whitman, and he would come by and he would talk to me a lot too, and encourage me to stay in school and to do good and stuff like that. So she was big on getting an education and things like that. She tried hard, and she wanted me to do something, and she didn't want me to. And like I said, I couldn't get in trouble, so it was a bad deal.
Seems like that's been really big.
Yes.
That was drilled into you.
It was drilled into me a lot.
What did your father do at Hanford?
He was a laborer most of the time, just, I think he worked with the concrete a little bit, but I think he was just, he worked out of local 348 in Pasco.
And which one's that? Is that just the
Labor's local, yeah, Labor's
Okay.
union. And as I got older, I think he had a tough time at one while because they had an election, and my dad was behind this one guy that didn't win, and the guy that won knew that, and so my dad was real limited on getting a good job after that, and so he quit later on, and he went and this guy that used to be in the orchard business, Bob Geyer, I think he had a lot to do in the laborers at one time. I think he was a supervisor in one of my dad worked a lot of the dams like Ice Harbor, Lower Monumental, and a couple others that I remember. And so the guy wouldn't give him a lot of work, and so it was kind of hard on him. So he went and worked out in Findlay for Bob Geyer, and he was like a supervisor or something. He would like, people would come in to pick grapes, and my dad would be, okay, you're in charge of making sure they get all these done, and he had to, and stuff like that. But my mom was really upset with that because Bob didn't pay him a lot of money, and so it was, and my dad wouldn't go back and work out of the hall anymore for some reason. Whatever happened to him, it just kind of set him back, and it was kind of sad in a way because he just wouldn't go back and get his. And one guy tried to get him to come back so he can get his pension set, and he wouldn't go back. So it was a little bit difficult. And whatever happened, I don't know. He wouldn't talk about. He would never sit down and tell me, "Hey, son, this is what happened to me," and so I didn't know. But I know that they tried to get him to go back, and my mom said, you need to go back, because there was one guy from the hall, I think it was Paul Millsap, he got in later on, and he came into my dad and said, Mr. Barton, he called him Cracker, he said, you need to come back and go back out and get your pension set. And my dad just said, no. Because Bob had been nice to him, and so he was kind of loyal to Bob, and so Bob needed his help, so he wouldn't go back. He helped Bob, and so he just worked with him until he got to where he couldn't get around so good.
Let's get to my sheet here. So next set of questions are about your work history and experiences at the Hanford Site. So what sort of work did you do out at Hanford?
So you want to go to start or later on?
Yeah, let's go through the whole thing.
I'm going to do the best on my memory to tell you. So, like in high school, I think once I had got 18, I think you could work out in the area. So I got a job in the 300 area, just a summer job. Mm-hmm. So I would just go out and wash windows, and they would put me with someone and, do pick trash, up trash, and it was okay, for a few years, and then so I did that I think for about 2 summers, and then they liked me out there, and I went to CBC, and they said, well, you can work nights. They gave me an opportunity. They said, yeah, if you're going to school in the day, you could come out and work at the 300 area at night because the summer job was ending. And I said, I think I better try to do some homework and stuff because I'm going to get in trouble. So I told them, no, I couldn't. That was a good opportunity because they liked what I did, and, I got along okay. And so, but I didn't do that. And then, let's see, I went up to Eastern, and I'd come back and I would work out in the area with Jeannie Carpet Cleaning. Dan Carter ran that, and I would come home and work on the weekends sometimes for doing floors and cleaning the buildings and waxing floors and stuff like that. And then in '73, let's see, I graduated up at Eastern, and I came back and I worked at FFTF, and I got into laborers there, and I worked about a couple of years as a laborer out of local 348.
It's the same one your dad had been in.
Mm-hmm. And I worked at FFTF for till 75. Then my girlfriend, sitting over there, she decided to leave and go to Australia because I wasn't going to cut the cake soon enough. So she says, well, I want to take off and go to Australia. And I said, okay. And so I said, well, this is kind of boring. I need to go do something different. So in 75, I joined the military. So I went into military for 3 years in the Army. And I think Kathleen got back in 76 or so. 77. Mm-hmm. And I was in the military till 78. And then I came back, and I think I started working construction again. Mm-hmm. When I got back. I started working construction just for a little bit. But then in 78, I got into the apprenticeship, Local 112, because when I got back, they were looking for people for affirmative action, was helping, some of the minorities get into the apprenticeships. Mm-hmm. And at that time, they wanted blacks to get in because it was pretty much, you couldn't just go down and get in just by applying. So there was pressure with, I think it was probably the CAC or one of them, Affirmative Action Committee. I thought it was Perry Blackwell, whatever organization he was running at the time. He said, okay, we're putting some kids into these programs, and he said, since you don't have a job, you just got out of the military, let me see your DD-214, honorable discharge. Okay, look like you can probably get in. So then I got into the apprenticeship in 78, and then I did 4 years, and I got out in 82, and then I worked a few jobs in the construction, and then they were going to lay me off, and I was hard time finding work, and I said I got to get something more permanent because she didn't want me to travel. I got married in 1980. She didn't want me to travel. She said, okay, if you're traveling, I'm going too. I said, no, because she was teaching school. I said, no, you can't go. I have to go. She said, no. And I was sitting here with these kids, and you're running all over the country. I said, I got to find a job locally then. So I knew people. Mm-hmm. For growing up in the area, I knew people. And so C.W. Brown, he worked at Energy Northwest. And so I said, and our family knew their family. Well, we knew pretty much all the black families that were here over time, but he worked at Energy Northwest. And so he said, they'll try to put a word in for you. And he said, well, they don't have a lot. He said, you can come out here as a laborer. And I already had my electrical apprenticeship, So I said, yeah, I just want to start. I need to work, So I started as a laborer at Energy Northwest in 84. And I worked there until June 30th of 2015.
Wow. And what did you do the whole time that you were at Energy Northwest?
Electrical maintenance.
Electrical maintenance.
The first one I went to Energy Northwest as a laborer just to get in, and it took me about 8 months. And then the opening came in, and they said, okay, I got into the electrical, and they said, we're going to make you an apprentice again. I go, what? I said, why? Well, you don't know this system and stuff. And I go, okay. So I had to do that for about 8 months or so. After I got in, I got hired June 6th of 84, and I think I got into electrical in February of 85. And then, so I had to do an apprenticeship for a while. So then I got that, and then so everything started to work out okay. So I didn't have to travel to look for work, and I just worked out there.
That's great. Could you describe a typical workday?
In the beginning, it was pretty easy, pretty laid back. Had to do a lot of. It was at one time, I think it was one of the hottest plants, as far as radiation in the country, as far as them controlling it and the places and things that you had to do at work. So a typical work day, way back then, they just come in and give you an assignment, and you go out and just start checking batteries, changing lights, and doing like that. And when I started, you could pretty much, you could work 16-hour days pretty much if you wanted to. It was like that because they were, just starting up pretty much, and you could just work pretty much all you wanted to work. Yeah, and they didn't have any, like at the end when I left, they had hours where the fatigue rule. They passed some other stuff later on to where people were making so many mistakes at nuclear plants that you had to only can work so many hours in a certain period, and so they had that in effect. But when I first started, that wasn't in effect. You just could work and do pretty much what you wanted.
How would you describe your relationships with your coworkers and your supervisors?
Yeah, it was difficult at times. Yeah, a little bit difficult.
How so?
Well, you try to have to figure out what was going on at the time, and you knew that, when I got into the electrical shop, I was the only black guy in there, and so you weren't told a lot of things. Some of the guys when I first got in the shop, they were letting them work all these hours, but they didn't tell me I could work. So I was saying, oh, okay, and then I think some of the guys would ask, hey, why can't he work or something? And then they started letting me work a few other shifts. But it seemed like I had to do a lot of rad work, more so than, if they had some critical that I could figure out, I had to go in and do it. I'm going like, wow, my dose limit is like way up there, and like at times, I would be exceeding mostly everybody on the crew as far as my dose. It was crazy, and but what could you do? I couldn't really say anything because it was what you had to do, I guess. And some of the supervisors, they weren't as nice, and they just. But I knew that, when you got out there and you started figuring it out, you didn't have anybody really you knew to turn to for help, really. And I knew I needed to work, and so you just put up with a lot of stuff that just to keep your job. I didn't want to, because the way I look at it, it's like this, that if I go to another job, how do I know it's going to be any different? And so I just would put up with a lot of stuff sometimes.
Yeah. What kinds of interactions did you have with coworkers and supervisors outside of work?
Outside of work? Sometimes we'd get, in the electric shop, so I would help, at times I would help coordinate a lot of stuff. So we would go and play softball and stuff and basketball after work, and it was okay like that. But, you always knew who was who, and some of the guys that are around that didn't want to play or be doing that type of thing, they didn't go. But we had interaction. It was okay, and we'd go down and go have a beer or something, and then I made sure that I could, was there and to go do it.
What were the most difficult aspects of the job?
As far as?
Working conditions, but also kind of like the work environment.
I think once, it seemed like as after I first got in and later on when some of the old timers left and then the new people came in and some of the things changed, it got a little more difficult as far as the work environment.
How so?
Well, we had this, I don't know if I should mention names. We had a few supervisors that didn't want to see me in the shop, I'm sure. And then he would push say for one instance, I think where this one supervisor I had for a long time, they wanted to get rid of one of the workers. And he was a white guy. And the guy used the N-word. And they came to me and said, they told me, Keith, we can't have this. This guy's there using this N-word. And he said, this can't happen. And he said, we need you to help us and we're going to straighten this out. And I said, I said, why would I go after him? I'd have to go out after half the shop. I said, I'm not going to do that. And I think I upset him, so it was like a bad deal for me with him after that. They would come up with little nitpicking stuff. Like one day I would get a work assignment and we'd go and get the job done. And the supervisor, and then I was working with this other guy, Tony Galaviz, and we fixed a gate for security. And the security said, "Man, you guys did a great job." He said, we got some treats over in our shop. He said, "You guys go have some." And I told Tony, I said, "Tony, I can't go over there." I said, "These guys are going to get me if I go." He said, "So?" He said, "I'm going." I said, "Okay." So he went over and we came back. The supervisor came and we walked into the shop and he said, "Where have you guys been?" And we said, "Well, we were on the gate." He said, "I was out at the gate. You guys weren't there." And then Tony said, "Well, I went over and had a piece of cake." And the supervisor said, "I need you both to go home." He said, "You guys are out of your work area and you should be reported back to the shop. Just go home." I said, "Wow." With pay. So we got paid to go home. Okay. So we came back and they had this big meeting and they said, well, and our steward, Tom McMahon, he came in and he talked to him and he talked to the supervisor. But before I went home, I had to go talk to Bob Morris, who was our supervisor at the time. And he had the other guy, Bill Letourneau, send me home. And so I talked to Bob. He said, "Your situation is just like this." He said, "You're riding in a car with a guy and he stops and he's going to rob the bank. And you're in that car and you leave. You're just as guilty as the other person." I said, "Well, okay." He said, "So that's the situation we have here." So I went home and then we went with a higher meeting. I come back to work. We had to go to several other meetings and they said, "We don't see that they really did anything wrong by going, and reporting back to the shop and to warrant sending them home for something like that. We don't see that should have happened." And they said, "Mr. Barton, what would you like to do right now, since this has happened?" He said, "We don't see that you're at fault. What would you like to do?" I said, "Nothing." I said, "I would just like to do my job and be left alone. I don't want to go after them." I said, "I'm not after them, they're after me." And so they put me on a different crew and it was a little bit different, but not a lot different because you couldn't do anything. It's like if you would be working, and so what they would do is like, "Okay, we're giving out awards. People that do a great job around here, we're going to give awards." And so all of these people who got awards were his friends, the people that he liked. Mm-hmm. And I'm still the only black guy in the shop, so I'm not going to get the award. I'm not going to base it on that. But the fact that he didn't like me and I didn't follow suit and get rid of a guy that he wanted to get rid of and use me to do it was like, okay, we're going to punish you as long as we can. And it was like crazy at times. And then one time, I was working with this guy named Johnny Lane. Kathleen remembers this story. And so they were trying to like put the blame on me, I think, for this. So I think it was like in about 93, somewhere in there. It was we had a shutdown. And during the shutdown, we have all these electrical enclosures, these cabinets and stuff that supply power to different equipment. I'll try to shorten the story up because I do kind of carry on, I know. But when they shut the power down, sometimes they shut the feeder breaker off that's feeding the whole cabinet. And some of them were like that, but this particular one wasn't. So we had Johnny Lane, who was working with me, and we had to go clean this cabinet. And I assumed Johnny knew that the cabinet was hot, or we always have to test before we touch and all that stuff. So we were cleaning down below, and this cabinet blew up, and Johnny got hurt. And so it's like, it was all my fault. How come you weren't protecting Johnny? I go, well, I had been called away to answer a question to a guy, and I didn't know Johnny was going to go into the top of the cabinet to clean.
Mm-hmm.
And then so when I walked away, is when the explosion happened, and Johnny got severely injured. He didn't die, but he was injured, um, and so when it blew up, Johnny was on the ground and he was yelling and screaming, and he said, "Keith, Keith," and I ran back, and then Johnny was on fire. You know, his clothes were on fire, and so like I had a jacket on. It was kind of cool that day, and we were in the turbine building, and so I took my jacket off and put the flames out, and I grabbed Johnny because the thing was still exploding, and I pulled him to the side, you know, and they never hardly said anything about it there. But there was one guy in the mechanic shop, Jeff Rao. He said, "Keith," he said, and he was a steward. Well, he was a steward, not our steward, but over the mechanics. He said, "Tell me about what happened." And I told him, and I didn't know what he was doing. He said, "Tell me about what happened up there with you and Johnny." And I told him the story that I just told you. I said, "Well, Johnny and I were working, and the cabinet blew up, and Johnny was on fire, and I went and grabbed him. I grabbed him by his heels, because he was just on the ground screaming, and I pulled him out of the line because that thing was all blowing up, and got him to safe. And then they were doing a drill that day, so everybody was suited up to respond to the drill, and so they reported, and they came over and grabbed Johnny and flew him over to Harborview. But Jeff said, "Well, Keith, I'm going to put you in for something here, because I think what you did was a heroic act, because you shouldn't." The guy that I went to answer the question with, he was yelling at me, "Keith, don't go over there, don't go over there, stay away from that." Mm-hmm. I said, "I can't, man." You know, I don't think I even said I can't. I just turned and looked at him, and I just ran and grabbed Johnny and then pulled him out. And when Johnny finally got out of the hospital, they had this big deal, and the wife and I went up to Spokane, and it was like a life-saving award they gave me for, you know, going back and getting Johnny out of the fire. But
it was the union, never the company.
Yeah, it was the union, but the company never said anything. Yeah, they didn't even acknowledge anything. They were just like, why didn't? And then I would go to class, and then we're in the classroom, and then someone had posted all these pictures on the wall of where the fire and all that stuff was, right? And you're sitting there trying to study, and in this room, and you have to look at all of that while you're trying, you know. And I know what I went through, and I wouldn't talk about it with them. I just would look at it and just say, why would they do that? And then what they did, Johnny's daughter worked out there as a laborer. They sent her up there to clean up the stuff where her dad had gotten hurt. She had to go up there and clean up all of the debris and stuff that was on the floor, and her dad almost died. And I said, what kind of company is this? It was really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, wow. We have a picture of Johnny and the wife and I back then that they took up there in an award thing, and guys were saying, you need to bring that award out and put it at work. I said, no, it's not something I'm not proud of. It was something that happened, but Johnny got hurt. I'm not going to say, hey, look what I got, because it wasn't about me. It was like, it was a sad deal. And so they just viewed it different, It's like, man, I don't know, why weren't you over there? I don't know how to answer those questions, because Johnny been an electrician longer than I had. We would ride to work together sometime, and so he was one of the nice guys. And Johnny had been a steward in the local 77 at one time also, and we got along great, didn't we, Johnny and I? And people probably, and Johnny probably didn't pay attention. Johnny probably should have retired. I think he was like about 67 when the accident happened.
Oh, wow. So
he was still working. He probably should have retired. And back then, I don't know if he had a drink that day or not that morning, but when I pick him up for work, a lot of times, before we had the drug testing and all that stuff and breathalyzer that they got later on, some of the guys would have a sip or either smoke a joint or something before they came to work. And then Johnny, I don't know if he had, but I don't think they even tested him for that. I don't think he had anyway. It was just a mistake. And so they had some changes after that, but the guys were telling me, oh, I would quit if I was you. I don't know, And I said, well, why? I don't think I did anything wrong. It was kind of sad like that.
Yeah.
And then it was like and a lot of stuff would happen that they would have to go into these real. We had to go into the reactor one time, and it was really hot, and didn't know who to send in, and oh yeah, we're going to send these guys in, and they'd prep them all that stuff, and they would cancel it, and this went on for about 3 days, and I said, well, who's going to go in? We don't know. And then I came back to work. I was off. I come back to work, and they said, oh, this is the night we're going to do it. Oh, really? So we had to go get neutron and all this other gamma exposure, to go do this job. And it's like, then you have to go out and do a body scan to see what you picked up. And probably a reason for my cancer that I had, later on. But they was out there, they don't do anything. But it was difficult at times. Just later on, at first part of it, we used to play and everybody would have fun. And I was in the shop. Frank Bono and we would organize a lot of feeds and stuff. And hey, we're going to have this electric shop deal. We want to have everybody participate. And we'd have fun like that. Later on, we didn't do that because the rules changed and it got more serious. And you couldn't have, you have to be out on the job doing stuff. And it was, you couldn't make them, if you made a couple of mistakes, you probably would not be doing the job because they would say, okay, we're going to pull your qual. You're not qualified if you messed up something that it was difficult.
Yeah.
You could get blamed for stuff that you didn't do sometimes. It's like that.
In what ways did the security and or secrecy at Hanford impact your work or daily life?
Security?
Yeah, or secrecy.
Well, I think I was in pretty good with some of them because sometimes you catch a security guard asleep. I'd say, hey, wake up, man. You got to wake up because you don't want to get caught asleep. So I think I was in pretty good with a lot of, because, I wasn't one to go turn someone in.
Yeah.
Even some of the guys I work with, if they made a mistake or if I saw something like if you leave something in a cabinet, I would let them know. I wouldn't go turn them in. Or if I found a badge one time, it was in the men's room. I said, "Who is this person? We need to get the badge back to him." So if you went and turned it, because he was a temporary guy, if I had gone to the security and turned the badge in, that guy would have been fired because he was a temporary employee. Mm-hmm. A regular employee probably would have got a couple of days off. Temporary, you're gone. You left your badge. So I was the type of person to say, "Hey, find this guy and tell him his badge is here." So they'd get on the page and say, report to here. He'd go over there and say, here's your badge and stuff like that. So, I would do stuff like that. So I didn't. But NRC, you had to really be careful because I think they kind of felt they weren't doing their job if they didn't find something. So they're looking all the time. They're looking for something. They're looking for something wrong, something you do wrong. So we had these guys, observers, that come out and watch you work. Okay, so we got some observers here. We want to check you out and say, okay, we're going to break. We'll be back in 15 minutes. And so we'd try to go to break. But then they'd come back and watch and then see what you did. And then they would critique you and say, well, you did this well. But the thought was you can never get 100. Just like on the evaluation, you could never get 100%.
Yeah.
Depending on who you were, because they always had to find something wrong. The supervisor would tell you can't get 100%. We will get gigged if we say that you did everything right. So you say, okay, well, give me that, and that's fine. And then if you got really mad on certain supervisors, you can go talk to them and tell them, and they say, well, you want me to change it? Yeah, you need to change. Okay, we'll change it. But security, NRC, you had to be real careful. If they saw you NRC in particular, they would come out different times of night to check you and just to walk around. And a lot of times they're looking for security because they're got 12-hour shifts and they're night shift. The guy would come at 1 or 2 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And they'd walk up, and if they catch you asleep, you're pretty much toast.
Yeah.
And that's what their job was, to catch you doing stuff. And everybody kind of hated the NRC, and they know what guy would come out. And they would never want to interact. They would never interact with you. And I know there was one black guy that come out, and you say hi, he would just walk like he would never have a conversation with you because he's looking, and we know that. So.
And NRC just has jurisdiction over civilian energy power, right? Yeah.
Well, Well, they have that guy. He would go to control room and look for stuff if the procedure, see where you're at in the procedure, and and see how they're doing stuff and watch because you had three-way communication, as they say, and if you didn't use the phonetic alphabet to discuss what you're doing, your next move, and if you did something wrong, if you did something wrong in the control room, if you're an operator, you don't work in the control room anymore. You lose your stipend, you lose your pay pretty much, and they just send you out and you just go kick rocks until you can find something else to do, or either quit. And depending on the severity of what you did, NRC say, okay, that guy couldn't come back. But they had to have punishment for a wrongdoing because to show that they corrected it.
Right.
And so it was difficult. It was stressful, very, very stressful at times.
What was your reaction, or what do you know about your parents' reaction to learning that the work that your father had done contributed to the development of atomic weapons?
I don't know. They didn't really discuss too much. They just said he worked out there and that he made a good wage, and they're pretty much happy, I think. So they don't know that he did anything because everything was so secret. You would be working on something. I don't think they knew if they were actually working on something related to a bomb or something. I don't think they knew it because they wouldn't tell you anything. And I knew that I would never hear them discuss like, oh yeah, I was in this one cell, and they wouldn't say anything that I ever heard.
It sounds like most of your work out there was not related to plutonium production.
No, not mine.
But I'm wondering, what do you think about that larger enterprise having worked so close to it?
Well, I think they were doing stuff to try to get it right, and then you would see some stuff that happened that went wrong, but I wasn't a whistleblower, so I don't say anything because I wanted to work, because I knew what the repercussions going to be. If you said something, you're not going to be you're going to be working probably for long.
Yeah.
And then you just kept your mouth shut about some things, because I worked at 100 N, there was a big water spill, and the Columbia River's right there, and I said, that's not good. I didn't say anything. That's bad. Somebody needs to shut the water off. That water's contaminated. It's headed for the river. It sure is. Just kept your mouth shut.
What do you think is the most important legacy of the Hanford site?
The fact that they made the bomb helped contribute to, changing things. And that's, I think, the big legacy, that they participated in that.
Okay, so switching away from work and towards civil rights activities at Hanford and Tri-Cities, what were the major civil rights issues for African Americans at Hanford and in the Tri-Cities during your time here?
Well, I know some of the times, like, the money was good. And I would hear the talk of, let me know if I'm not saying the right thing, though, but I would hear, like, some of the guys talk, if they saw that you were living well, if you were working and you were doing pretty good, and if you drove, like, a newer car to work, you probably won't be working very long because people think that you were doing too good. And you need to have a step back. So you didn't want to look like you were doing too good by showing that you were living a pretty good lifestyle. So you just kind of have to keep it low key. And then I think what I would see as a kid, that those guys worked hard, but they drank hard too on the weekends. It was like But I don't know if I told you that my mom was on the city council at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was an activist, I think, and trying to make sure that things got done.
Yeah, you mentioned she had campaigned for sidewalks.
Yeah, and then at the time that she was on the city council, they were pushing for the cable bridge, and she was instrumental in, or on the committee and on the city council at the time that they were voting to get that cable bridge done.
Hmm.
Yeah. And some other things, huh, babe? Um, she was pretty outspoken, wouldn't you say? Yeah, a lot outspoken. So she kind of kept, pretty much ran things around the house, and then she pretty active in the church, and you tried to make sure that people that needed help could try to get the help that they needed. And if it had to come out of her pocket, sometimes she would do that too.
Who were the important leaders of civil rights efforts in the area?
Back then, I think Wally Webster was a big one. I think Art Fletcher came through here one time, and I think he was on the city council. He was kind of a big shot. And I think my mom was in there too, Katie Barton.
Katie Barton?
Yeah, she was in there because she knew all these people, and she would give up and give talks and stuff at different things. And let me think. That's just a few of the names. I know there's more names, but I know this.
Jackson?
Yeah, Joe Jackson, I think he was on the city council too. And he was more of a quiet type, I don't know what he pushed for. Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
What was Catherine? She wanted to run for, Senate or something?
Yeah, she was.
Catherine Smith.
Catherine Smith.
Yeah, she was big in pushing my mom. And Mom knew some people from WSU.
Yeah.
There was a professor.
Dallas Barnes.
Dallas Barnes was a big
We
guy.
talked to Dallas.
Yeah, he was big. He probably knew a lot more because he had a business on the east side of Fish Market or something, and he was into a lot of things. And
Yeah, we interviewed Dallas about a month ago now, and we're hoping to interview Wally. But those are some other good. Any other names?
Wayne Jackson, did you interview him? He knew a lot. Because he worked he was my mom's campaign manager when she was for the city council,
Okay.
when she had to run at large. But and he could tell you a lot about the activity and what Mom did.
For him?
Hmm?
Do you have contact information for him?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Hmm.
Okay, maybe I can get it from you after the interview.
Yeah, I can give it to you.
Okay. What were some of the notable successes of civil rights efforts in the area?
I think at the time before they did away with this affirmative action and stuff, they were instrumental in getting a lot of kids into building trade crafts and stuff like that. And, because otherwise, like now, you can't get in because, it's nobody there to push sometimes, and this makes it a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people get overlooked and stuff like that. But at the time when they had to take you in, because I would hear it too, because I'd go to work and back then, and guys would say, "You got my job." I said, "How did I get your job?" Why would it just be me? Because he figured if I'm the only black there, that he could have had that job because all other guys are white. So I took his job. I'm going like, really? So I would never react or say anything. I'd just kind of usually walk away. So, well, I'm sorry, man. It'll be a little early next time.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, It's just like because you couldn't you couldn't be pushed to where you're going to have a confrontation because it's probably not going to be good for either one of you.
Yeah.
You just got to walk away.
Yeah.
And just deal with it.
What were some of the biggest challenges in the civil rights movement here?
Biggest challenges, I think it was just the day-to-day grind, just trying to get stuff done. Just trying to get the people to realize that, hey, we need sidewalks, we need this, and we need that. And I know, I think my mom, I know Catherine, I think one time they went to a meeting and they told the people at the meeting, said, if you're not going to get certain provisions for the east side and do something to east side improvement, we will never pass another school levy. So it was like a threat that we're going to get all the people not to vote for a levy. So, count us out if you're not going to make some improvements or any kind of thing like that for the city. And I think it helps some people get jobs, like I say, that ordinarily wouldn't have gotten jobs. And they fought for people, hey, we have no blacks in certain areas and stuff, and so let's do something, because it was hard, hard getting hired, certain things. I was pretty fortunate, I would say, like in the 6th grade when I got out, the Mr. Luke, he came and said, we need 2 guys that you would select to work at the Jumbo restaurant. It was on Lewis Street on the east side. And so he picked myself and Bill Skinner. Bill Skinner was, I don't know what condition he's in now, but he ran a few committees on the east side. And he was, he would be a good one to talk to. I think his mind is still pretty good. Yeah, he's got a lot of physical issues, but he ran he could tell you a lot if you could get a hold of him. I don't have his number.
It's okay, we can try.
I'm sure I could look it up, and I got your number. I could always call and let you know if I could get it.
Great. Let's see here. I just have a couple more questions, actually.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we're almost done here. Was there anything different about civil rights efforts here compared to the larger civil rights, like national civil rights movement?
I don't think we had as many people out to, other than just the committees and stuff, to go after things. I think the fact that we didn't have a lot of people pushing for the movement or whatever. But in a way, I don't think we had the same challenges they had in some of the larger places either. Because like I said, for a while I don't think I really had it all that bad. I knew that you couldn't do a lot of stuff, and but I don't think I probably had it as bad as some people in Seattle, or maybe Seattle, or even down south, that they had it, because it was. So I don't know of any lynchings here or anything like that. You just didn't, maybe not get served or treated bad, but you didn't have.
Did that ever happen to you or your family? Did you ever get refused service?
You remember?
I remember you and I got, remember the guy at Denny's that got mad at us?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I don't remember. Sometimes, it's not that you don't get served, but, it's almost like we go to a place and we sit down and everybody else is eating, and you've been there a lot longer, and you say, like, this is not too good. And so you kind of pick up on little things like that, and it's pretty subtle at times, but if you experience some of the things that you can see it right away.
Right, you can put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, you can put 2 and 2 together real fast.
Were you directly involved in any civil rights efforts? I know you said your mom was, but did you ever get involved in anything in the late 60s?
No, I just watch her. I wouldn't. I just watch her go to stuff, and they might have a dinner or something that, or maybe it'd be a pageant or something. But all of that other stuff that she did with her constituents, like Wayne and Catherine Smith and people like that. And you had a lot of blacks that pretty much just weren't interested. They had a job. They didn't participate and go to that stuff. My mom was busy and she was out there, but I know a lot of the people, they didn't, if it benefited them, they said, oh yeah, that's great, but they didn't go and push that. It was only like a handful of people usually doing it.
Why do you think there There wasn't a broader involvement.
You know, like I think most of the guys that were doing that, they had a lot of education, and some of the other people I'm talking about, they they were just content to have what they had and not to worry about what someone else didn't have.
Mm.
And my mom, she wanted to see equal rights for the community, not just for herself. And I think that's why she fought. So it just took that kind of a person
Right.
to do it, because a lot of people, if they had a job, they didn't want to rock the boat and be out, canvassing for someone else to, hey, sidewalks, oh, haven't ever had sidewalks, what am I going to do with sidewalks? I don't care. So Mom thought that was not right, because that she saw the world different, and they were just content. And I think Mom could have been content, but she didn't take a lot of stuff and like talking down. Like, she would stand up for my dad, because like my dad was like that. He didn't have a lot of education, but she was with him. And I think when he retired, he went down Social Security office, and my dad said, "Well, where am I? Need to sign." She said, "You sign right here, boy." And my mom said, "What?" And then a few curse words came out, and she let the person know that my dad was not a boy. She said, "I don't know where you from, but we don't have any boys in our neighborhood or whatever that's 65 years old. So he's blank blank boy." So we got that straight. So it's like, whoa, okay, it's the wrong person to pick on here. But yeah, she stood up for what she felt was right, and then she didn't want to take anything less.
Do you think you kind of said earlier that it seemed that those that were more educated were kind of those that were more willing to push. Did you see a correlation there between education level and the involvement in civil rights and equal rights?
Yeah. And equal rights?
Or yeah, civil rights and equal rights, like pushing for equal rights.
Oh, I was gonna say no. They're it's not education doesn't mean that you're gonna be treated any better.
Right.
No, that didn't mean that. But I mean, the more educated they were, the more they were more likely to speak out, because some of the guys, they're probably not too good at expressing themselves when they're limited. Because if you're like my dad, I don't read a lot myself, or hardly any, but I think I'm, a little bit in a different level than he was, but not being able to read at all and express himself. He could probably tell you how he felt about things, but I never heard him say anything. Other than the fact that he knew he couldn't get a job because he voted for the wrong person that got in, and or that didn't get in, but. Yeah, my mom, she saw the world a little bit different because of her life experience, and I think that, like I said, she had some college, and she saw what could happen, and she just didn't put up with a lot of stuff. And she would go and fight for better conditions.
Yeah. What would you like future generations to know about working at Hanford and living in the Tri-Cities during the Cold War?
Well, like I tell my kids, I said, getting an education is for us. We wanted the kids to get a good education. And I said, the better you get education, the more education you get, I said, you'll make more, and I think you might get treated better because you're at that level, and I should just always try to be the best. And am I answering that correctly? I'm going to get off on a tangent again.
No,
have to be careful.
It's one of those questions that doesn't have a right or wrong answer.
But I just think that if you get an education, your life's going to be a whole lot better, because the challenges that you meet and you face, that you can deal with a lot more sometimes, that you're not struggling just trying to make a day-to-day to live and eat and stuff like that, and so it's a better life for you. And when you can get out and say, okay, I can't work here. I know I can go over here because I've got credentials that to say I could do it, or I can move somewhere else and get in and do that. And that's what we taught our kids, to make sure that they got a good start by getting an education. And I think that's the big thing. And staying out of trouble. It's like if you wanted out at Hanford where they pay well for this area, you don't want to have anything on your record. If you get arrested and you go out there and it shows up on your record, you're not going to even get hired. You can forget it, because you have the clearance. And I think it's even more so moved. It's not only a record, but they when I left, they would come in and they said, "Okay, we're going to run your credit score." I go, what? So the guy ran mine. He said, "Yours is better than mine." I said, "Well, I guess that's a good thing, huh?" Probably you shouldn't run mine anymore then. But, they look at stuff like that. Just, maybe what kind of person you might be. Would you be willing to accept a bribe or something like that?
Right.
Or give a secret out because you're struggling and they want to just know all your background. So we would get fingerprinted. We would get all of that done. And and if we get in trouble, you got to call them and let them know if you got arrested, and depending on the severity of your crime, whether or not you're going to be working or not.
Wow.
Yeah, so you just keep your nose clean and work hard, and if you want to move up the ladder, it's not that way in every case, but it's a little harder because some of the things that, like in the trades, you just can't go out there and say, okay, I'm going to move into this job without going to school for it. You have to go to school, but once you get out there, that you know what's going on, and it's likely that if you just do your job and do it well and stay out of trouble, you can do okay. That's kind of, I don't know if I knew my job well enough, but I knew how to play the system enough to stay out there. I figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured it out.
Yeah, you sure did. Is there anything else you would like to mention related to migration, segregation, and civil rights, and how they impacted your life?
Help me, babe.
I think if it hadn't been for the things that were done when you were a child, you would never have gone to college. And you and I would never have met. You wouldn't have your kids today. It would have been, your life would have been considerably different.
Yeah.
Because they stopped school segregation when you were young.
Yeah, at Whittier it was pretty much, I think, probably 98% black. And then, and in high school there was a bunch of fights all the time. The black and the white kids, there was a lot of fights. I didn't get anything. I had fights, but I was fighting with the black kids. I don't know why that worked out. But, yeah, so that's who I was fighting with, all the guys I grew up with. But, yeah, it was. I would see that a lot, people getting into skirmishes. But, like I took some shop classes, and like I took automotive class, and the guy said, okay, we're going to make you the guy that they go to, we're going to make you the lead or whatever in the shop class. So I didn't see a lot of that, I struggled with my other grades a little bit, but my shop classes was kind of a relief because I could pick up on that stuff pretty good and do okay and just have fun. And I didn't get in any fights. A couple at the school, but like I say, they were with black kids, but I never had a fight with any of the white kids. And but I would see the struggles. But then the drugs came along, and that made it a lot bad, pretty bad, in the 60s and stuff, when the drugs came in, and a lot of people just went downhill after that. I see a lot of guys just, it was terrible, that arrests and deaths, and it just took a toll on a lot of people. I think that was a big thing that happened. That was kind of sad. And so that made struggles a lot worse to go somewhere and not be able to work. So my mom always say, if you're not going to work, you're going to steal. So that's what they did a lot of times. I could count a lot of guys that just took to doing bad things to survive.
Yeah. Well, Keith, thank you so much for coming and taking the time to interview with us today.
Yeah.